Well, welcome back, everybody. We are in Unit 2 now, and this is the first week of a 2-week unit, and we're going to talk about perimeter security for the most part. And this week we'll talk almost exclusively, in fact, exclusively about locks and locking devices, because they are the, no pun intended, key to good security on the outside of a building. And next week we'll talk about lighting and barriers and a little bit about protection systems like emergency call stations on the outside of a building. They're all part of a physical security plan that starts from the outside and works its way in that whole concentric ring, depth of defense kind of a scenario. But this week we're going to talk about locks, and you probably haven't thought a lot about them, but every time you touch a doorknob, it's a different type of lock, and it hopefully was put on there with the right purpose. And I think that's what I really would look for the goal of this week to be, is that when you look at a doorknob and you look at the type of lock that's used, you'll be able to tell as a security leader whether or not the right doorknob and lock set was used on that door, so that the reason for securing the room is met. So let's jump into locks a little bit. So before we do anything, we really should talk about why does it matter? Because if it doesn't matter, let's not worry about it, right? But think about this. Would you put a doorknob with no lock on it on your house or your apartment? Just have a doorknob or a lever, whatever type of handle you want to have on it. When I say doorknob, I'm talking about both the lever type and the round type and the squared off, flat face type. But would you put one with no lock on it on your house or apartment? Probably not. Would you put a lock on that apartment that you'd have to go outside in order to lock? It couldn't be locked from the inside. You had to go outside to lock it. That doesn't make much sense, because one of the last things you do usually before you go to bed, at least me, is check to make sure the door is locked. I prefer not to step outside, especially in Michigan where I live this time of year in February, to lock the door to come inside to close it behind me, or worse yet, to figure out how I lock the door and get inside if I can't relock it from the inside, if it unlocks when I close the door. So the right type of lock matters in something like that. If you had a toddler, and would you be okay if they just went ahead and locked the door behind you when you walked out to get the mail? You stepped out onto the front porch to pick up an envelope or a package from good old Amazon, and the toddler slammed the door, made one quick move, and you were locked outside. Then they go play with the knives in the kitchen, mess around with the stove a little bit, maybe go through your finer things and start flushing your jewelry and all the great things that toddlers do. I don't think you'd be okay with that, and the type of lock that you have in your door matters in that case. You have to choose a lock set that really matches the application, what the end user wants from that lock set. And hopefully from the reading this week, you notice that there are several different kinds, and they have different reasons for being installed. And we want to match that application, the reason, with the type of lock set to make sure that we get the maximum physical security out of that lock set. So if the choice of the lock set matters, then how do you figure out what's supposed to be protected? What does the end user really want? We're going to use predictive modeling. And predictive modeling skills are important. We talked about those in the kickoff, so let's just go over those real quick again. So the predictive model is a little more guess than science, but you also think about personal experiences, and you may need to do a little research. But you're thinking like a criminal. You're thinking about what the end user wants to do. I want to be able to lock my house when I go to bed at night and not step outside to do it. And then you think about, well, how will the criminal potentially, thwart that? Frankly, if I had to go outside to lock the door at night, now I'm outside at night with the keys to my house in my hand, and if a criminal knows that pattern, they would likely hit me over the head, take my keys, go in, take what they wanted, keep the keys, so I'd have to change all the locks. So you have to think a bit like a criminal. But think about likely reactions, how people will likely react in an emergency, or the way that people normally do things, so that you can put the right type of physical security design and protections in when you talk about lock sets. So it's a predictive model. You're thinking about both what the end user wants to accomplish with that lock set and how a criminal might think to try to thwart what you're trying to do. So you have to use a little bit of prediction. And as we talked about in the kickoff, that's not hard. I mean, if you remember correctly, I predicted a certain number of people would look at my hat when I mentioned I collect hats. That's just human nature. I knew it was going to happen, and it certainly did happen, and I think I guessed 2, and I counted at least 4 as far as my bad eyes could see in the classroom. But you just know something's going to happen, and so you start to think about what could happen, what is likely to happen, and that's the predictive model we want to use when we're talking about lock set. So now we're thinking like an end user. We're trying to predict, right? What are we trying to accomplish? Do we want to keep the stuff inside safe while we're away? Do we want to protect people inside from harm while they're there? Do we want to keep outsiders out, but keep free egress so that in an emergency we can get out without having to do anything special, go through any, getting a key or anything along that line to get out of a room? Each of these lock sets has a different purpose, and we are going to predict what the user wants and then match the lock set to it. So the simplest of all doorknob sets, lock sets as they're called, is one that technically doesn't lock, and it's a passage set. It's used where the doors don't need to lock. There's no key cylinder, no means to lock it, there's no buttons, nothing you can do to lock it. It is simply a turn the knob, open the door. It's used on closets, coat closets, doors to small storage closets. Perhaps if you have any kind of swing door that has no lock on it, it may even, rather than have a bolt that retracts when you push the handle down, it may just have a little spring-loaded ball on it that clicks in place. It generally has no security use. It really is there just to close off something so you don't see it, right? It's more of a pretty thing, right? You put it on a door so you can close the door so nobody sees all of your clothes hanging in the closet or all of your office supplies or something. And it's often used as a default in new construction. And I say that because if you don't tell someone in a newly constructed building what type of door hardware to put on each door, what type of lock set, they'll normally put a passage set because it's the cheapest. There's no keys to worry about. And they put it in there because when you walk through the building, it looks finished, but it has very little use really other than to just keep a door closed so that it doesn't open until you turn the handle or do some other activity. Let me show you a picture of a passage set. It's a very, very simple set. So there you have it, simple passage set. It's got two levers, one on each side. If you turn either one of them, the latch bolt right here will retract and the door will swing open. When you push the door, this pushes in because it's slanted, hits the door, spring loaded, and the door clicks and it's closed. It is not locked, but it is closed. You can get these with all kinds of handles on them. You've got them probably in your house on about half the doors in your house or apartment, but the function they serve is to keep the door closed, but it has no real security function. Next up, we have the privacy lock set, and we're going to move from the least security oriented to the most security oriented in these lock sets. The privacy lock set is something that you probably have on your own bedroom and bath at home. It's seldom used in commercial applications simply because most of them have a key. If you lock something, you have a key. However, it could be used in a dressing room, mother's nursing rooms that most companies now are setting up in commercial buildings. Those types of things where no one can come in from the outside if you have it locked. It's got a thumb turn or a button or something on the inside that you push, and that keeps it from being open from the outside. Dressing rooms at your local Kohl's or whatever department store you happen to go to have these. And they normally have a tool on the outside as opposed to a key. There's just a little hole usually in them somewhere either next to the knob or right in the center of the knob. And you just take a small screwdriver, very thin blade, and just pop it through there, and it clicks, and it would open the door. Let's take a quick look at a privacy lock set. Here, courtesy of our friends at Amazon, is a picture of a privacy lock set. Very simple. The inside has a little thumb turn. You go into the bedroom, whatever, you turn this, and you've locked the door. But just in case someone needs to get in, on this side there is as you can see, a little spot where you can put a screwdriver in and turn it, and that would unlock it. Very good, especially for children's bedrooms when they lock themselves in and can't get out. You can just go take a screwdriver and turn it, and they realize what that button does, and they never touch it again until they're a teenager. But oftentimes, rather than the screw set, which I kind of like, there's just a little hole there. You can put any small blade in and just hit a little button inside, and it will release this button. It'll either turn this, or it will simply release it, and then you physically turn it. But again, a passage set is just for that. It is for someone inside who wants privacy, or excuse me, privacy set is just that. It's for people who want privacy inside. So they have the ability, using this, to lock themselves in, if you will. So when you push on this handle, it doesn't move. But if you needed to, you could just turn this and get yourself through. So low security, but it is kind of an indicator that the person inside, that someone is inside, and that they don't want to be disturbed. So next up, we have the office lock set. Now, an office lock set's a little bit different than a privacy set in that it has an actual key to open the door from the outside. So just like with the privacy set where there was a thumb turn or a button or something on the inside, the office lock set's the same there, But instead of that little screwdriver set or the hole I talked about where you could put a blade through, it actually has a lock in it. It actually has a key lock in it. And it is used simply to make sure that the person who owns the office or is assigned to that office has the key to get in, and that you have to use that key to do it. No one could use a little blade. It's not a simple privacy set where you lock yourself in. You also lock people out, and that is the main purpose of an office lock set. The issue with a office lock set that I want you to remember is that if someone comes into the office, person comes in the morning, they use their key, they open their office and they walk in, they put their things down, they do whatever, they go for coffee, they leave their office open because it's a general office environment, they only lock it at night. And I walk into that office and simply turn the thumb on the back of that knob the other way. It is now an unlocked door, and it won't stay locked unless the person checks it and locks it again with the key or locks it with the thumb turn. Most times people open their door with their key, open it up all the way, let it stay open all day, and then just close it behind them when they leave at the end of the day, and seldom push down to make sure that it's locked. And so an office lock set has that vulnerability. And we'll talk about electric strike doors, and I'll come back to this, but you never use an office lock set with an electric strike, and I'll show you why, because it's an easy way to break in. An office lock set is convenient for a user because they can physically unlock it with their key in the morning, and then they can turn that little knob during the day anytime they want to relock it if they so desire. It's pretty easy. Take their key with them and open it up. It is lower security for lower risk office doors simply because of that button on the back can be turned so that the door doesn't always stay locked. Let's take a quick look at an office lock set. So here we have an office lock set. Key to get in from the outside. Button on the back. Push the button in. You can lock it so that when someone comes, pushes down the handle to your office, they can't get in and you're in there. Or you open it up in the morning with the key. You can push the button and close it behind you and it will be locked. So now you're outside. If you forget to turn it, when you open it up in the morning, you turn it, the button automatically pops out. So it's unlocked. So unless you push the button again, you're not going to lock the door, or you could do it with the key. But unless you do something, you're not going to relock that door. So it's pretty easy to leave them unlocked during the day and sometimes forget to push the button when you leave at night and close the door, and now it is not a secured door. So they have a vulnerability. That's why they're used on lower risk, just common area offices. You'll probably find them on many of the professors' offices at Slippery Rock if you go and take a look. Not that uncommon of a lock set to use on general office applications, but they have the key to get them in, and it's usually a key and a master key that will override it, and that's all that will fit. So next up is the storeroom function lock set. Okay, and the storeroom function lock set requires a key to open every time. So it is much like, again, we're stepping up, each time. So the office lock set, you had to have a key to get in, but and you could turn a little knob on the back to leave it unlocked during the day if you so choose. A storeroom function lock set is locked all the time. You use a key to get in, and on the inside, it's blank. It always stays locked, and you have to use a key every time. It's great for electrical rooms, so if you have high voltage rooms, if you walk around the university, you will notice some rooms that are labeled high voltage by law, or there's a tag on there that says electrical closet or plumbing closet, those types of things where you don't want people to go inside. You never want to have the door unlocked, normally for a safety reason or a security reason. Could be higher value storage in the room, right? Anywhere leaving the door unlocked is a bad idea because there's no reason for anyone to go in there that doesn't have a key. You don't need to go visit someone inside the electrical closet, right? But you could go in there and hurt yourself. You put a storeroom function lock. Let's take a quick look at a drawing of a storeroom function lock. So this is obviously another grab from the web, and it's got even the price on it, $371. Yes, door hardware, that doorknob, especially for industrial use, is not a cheap thing. But if you look at it, here's the outside, and there's a key, goes in to unlock the door, and it throws the latch here, right? The latch bolt turns when you put in the key and turn it and push down the handle. The inside is blank. It has nothing. So every time when you turn that key, you can't turn it all the way one direction and unlock the door, pull the key out, and then it stays unlocked, put the key in and turn it the other way and have it locked down again. You turn the key, there's a spring, it unlocks the door so that you can push the handle down to get in, and then when you release the key, it springs back to its original position, and when you close the door, it is automatically locked. Storeroom function lock, always locked, great for safety sensitive areas, chemical storage areas, electrical closets, and also where you have some higher level of security that you may not need to be monitoring. So we're not talking your highest level, your highest risk type materials, but something that you want to protect a little better, you would use a storeroom function lock. So next up we have the classroom lock set. And even though you use these mostly on classrooms, quite frankly, I mean, that's where the term came from, just like the storeroom lock, it's just not on storage rooms. It's just the name given to that type of lock. And the classroom lock set is controlled by a key on the outside, but you can turn the key and unlock the door and leave it in the unlocked state, take your key out, or you can turn it and put it in the lock state and take your key out. All activity is done from the outside of the door. And the reason for this type of lock set is so back in the days when Dr. Wisniewski was a young child, and he would do things like the teacher would walk out of the classroom and he would go turn the knob on the back of the door and lock her out and get himself in trouble. That can't be done anymore because classroom locks don't have any hardware on the inside. The old style classroom locks, which is the original classroom lock set, don't have anything on the inside that can lock or unlock the door. It is all done from the outside of the door with a key, but you could turn the key. Unlike a storeroom, you could turn the key and unlock it and leave it unlocked. Pull your key out. Storeroom, you turn it, you unlock it, but the key won't come out. It'll spring back to the lock position as soon as you try to take the key out so that it stays locked. Classroom lock and unlock from the outside. Nothing on the inside that does it. Where would you use something like this? Well, anywhere where the occupant might lock you out. Think about healthcare facilities, mental health facilities, facilities where anywhere where the patient might lock the door and then potentially have an episode where they can't unlock the door. They're incapacitated for some reason, or they simply don't want you coming near them. Community corrections, same type of thing. You want to be able to lock and unlock the door from the outside so no one from the outside can get in, or people from the outside can get in, depending on how you have it turned, right, which way you've left the lock, which state you left it in. But you don't want people from the inside to be able to lock you out. Student common areas were always set to a classroom-style lock set so that nobody on the inside, especially in the 1960s, they were used primarily because students would have sit-ins in areas and they would lock faculty and then police and others out. With this style of lock, they couldn't lock the door. They could block it, obviously, but they couldn't lock the door. But a little less common use now in student areas, and that is really an offshoot of the whole active shooter thing. But let's take a look at a classroom lock set, the old style, real quick. So here's a cheaper version. That's the outside of a classroom function keyed lock set. It's a lever set. And on the exterior, you see it has the key. And on the inside, we can get it to go to the inside. There we go. It is blank. Now, this looks amazingly like the storeroom function lock. And the only way to tell which it is to put the key in and see if you can unlock it. On a classroom lock, you can put the key in on the outside, and you turn the key one way or the other, and it will unlock the door, and it will stay unlocked, and you can pull the key out. On a storeroom function, you'll put the key in, you'll turn it, it will unlock the door, but you can't pull the key out until you turn it back to its original position, which is the lock position. So the two of them look very similar. So you may not be able to tell from the look. You may have to ask someone, if you're trying to figure out what type of lock it is, to put the key in, turn it, and see if the door stays locked, or if it's allowed to unlock. Then you'll know the difference. But old-style classroom lock sets have that one major flaw. That is that if the teacher wants to lock the classroom door, she or he would need to go outside, put the key in, lock the door, and then step back in and close the door behind them. In the case of an active shooter, the last place you want the person who's going to get the children organized and put them in their right places for an active shooter drill or actual, you don't want them outside the room in harm's way. And so new style classroom locks have a lock on both sides. And the key to the classroom fits the outside to lock and unlock the door, just like a regular old style classroom security lock or classroom lock sets. But a classroom security lock set has a key on the inside. And it doesn't just use the key that fits the outside. Any key that's on that key set for the building. So let's just say the teacher has their keys and they have a key to the teacher's washroom, and they have a key to potentially the gym down the hall because the gym teacher gave them that because they use it sometimes for assemblies and things. They have a key to the assistant principal's office because they're working a project. They have 4 or 5 keys that belong to the building. They're all on the same building master set. Any one of those keys would work on the inside lock. That way, the teacher, if they grab their key set, they don't have to find the right one and try it. No, I got the wrong one, because they all look the same, right? Anyone that has the same number of grooves on either side, that's part of the same key hierarchy in a building, any one of those keys will fit in that to lock it from the inside in an emergency. Great for safe rooms for executives, great for emergency rooms, right? Emergency rooms are a very dangerous place to work. Security is very high in emergency rooms. If a doctor has a patient in a room and there is a security issue, they will be able to lock that treatment room from the inside to protect themselves and the patient. And classroom security lock sets are now being required in some jurisdictions for school facilities. So if you are getting into school security, which is a very interesting field, and there are a lot of jobs in it over the last several years, I can't tell you how many of my colleagues have taken jobs with major school districts as school security, chief of security, to harden classrooms, to train people on what to do because of the active shooter problem. But they may be required in some jurisdictions for school facilities. But any time that you need something where the person on the inside may need to lock that door in a hurry and make it totally secure, this is the type of lock you want on that. They could have the type with the button on it, sure. But if we saw, those weren't really as high grade as the classroom locks and the storeroom function locks, which are normally hardened, a better piece of commercial hardware. So this is your best bet really for classrooms today. Should have a keyhole on both sides of the door. I encourage you to check. When I was at Slippery Rock, I will admit, I did not check classroom doors to see if they had a key on the outside and a key on the inside. And if they do, they are most likely a classroom security lock set. Check to see, next time you walk in the classroom, see if one's there. If they don't have one, the old style classroom lock would probably suffice, but I would say that a better application would be this new style so that the instructor would not have to walk out into the hallway in an active shooter situation. They could lock the door from the inside using any key that's in the hierarchy of the building, and then get you against the wall that's not exposed to the hallway, and wait it out, which is the whole idea of shelter in place. So deadbolts. Deadbolts are pretty basic. A deadbolt is simply you throw the bolt across, and there's a receiver on the door frame side, and it locks it in place, normally with a thumb turn. But a deadbolt could actually be a slide. It's really used for additional security, and some deadbolts have a key on the outside. So if you have a high security area, you can throw the deadbolt as well with a key and use a different key for the entry lock set, right? For the storeroom function, normally lock set you would have. And then you'd have a deadbolt above it that just throws a big, thick deadbolt into the door frame for extra security, right? An extra lock. It really is a separate lock. Most house perimeter doors have a deadbolt in addition. You might have a chain on there, that you can open it partially up. And if we've watched anything from the movies, we see that those chains are absolutely horrific for security reasons. It takes about a 100-pound person's shoulder to bust them open and get in. There's a new type that's actually a kind of a flap, that's a metal thick flap that goes across the door that's much better. But with a deadbolt, you simply twist it to lock and unlock from the inside. It has to be a single movement. That's for egress purposes. You can't have it be too complex. You have to remember that when people have to get out of a room, you have to have a kind of a single motion, right? Turn the handle. When you turn the handle on a privacy set, you'll notice that button pops out by itself. You don't have to turn the thumb screw, then push the handle. When you push the handle, that'll turn itself, right? That's that single motion for egress that safety majors will tell you that you've got to have. A deadbolt's used for extra security to prevent entry during sensitive operations. So a deadbolt may be thrown from the inside if you're doing something in a room where you don't want anybody walking in. You've got evidence out where you have to control entry. That's where you'd use a deadbolt. So now we're going to talk a little bit about electrified locks. So those were all the mechanicals. No, there's actually one more, cipher locks, we'll talk about in a second, because I want to bring those up as well, because they can be a crossover. They can be mechanical or electrical. But electric strikes are pretty common use. I don't know whether you use those in the dorms. I imagine you do. And you'll know that there's an electric strike in use because you'll either hear a really loud click when the door opens or a buzzer when the door opens. That will tell you that there's an electric strike in use. And the electric strike's used when you use a card access or an electronic access system of some kind, right? When you're using like your card, your ID card to get in a building, you swipe it. You guys use MagStripe there at Slippery Rock, and you swipe the card and it opens the door. That's an electric type of lock, and most of them will be electric strikes. Electric strikes are, they can be problematic because there's a lot of moving parts. The other thing is that if you have an electric strike, and I'm going to show you in a second how they work in a picture, but it's best when you don't have a key at all on them, or the key that opens the door, because there's usually a key on the doorknob as well, is very tightly controlled. And the reason is that when you turn the key, that latch bolt, as you know, goes back into the door, right? You turn the key and the latch bolt retracts. An electric strike is just the opposite. The bolt stays where it is, and the door frame, there's a device in the door frame that kind of opens up and lets the door open. Okay? So you want to make sure that the key is very controlled. You never want to use it with a lock set that has the ability to stay unlocked. Again, I'll show you why when I show you a picture of this, and it also requires significant door frame work. So when you put one of these things in, if you're going to take it out, say you're going to use it for a temporary, you're going to take it out, you have to replace the door frame essentially. So don't put in an electric strike because you have to cut into the door frame. And I'll show you a picture of that, and we'll talk a little bit about that, the reason you don't want to use a lock set that has the ability to stay unlocked. Here's a picture of an electric strike. And the door, when it's closed, the bolt of the door here, the doorknob would be right here, right? The door would be closed, and the bolt would stick in here. And the doorknob is set so that it doesn't turn at all if it's set properly. So that door is locked. You can never pull that back. But when you use your badge, there'll usually be a badge reader over here, and you'll swipe your card or you'll hold it up if it's proximity, however it's triggered. Instead of the bolt coming like this and the door handle turning and you open the door, this flap right here releases. This is normally rigid. Okay, it's hard. When you try to pull the door against it, it hits this and it can't open. But when the right signal comes from the card being run, the card reader on the wall here, swipe your card, and you come over here, this buzzes, it makes that zzz noise, right? Or that loud click, and this pulls back. And there's nothing then to keep the door from opening. And after a certain set amount of time, this retracts again, the door comes back, the bolt hits it, it slides over it because it springs back, right? It's got that little angle on it, and the door can slide back, and it clicks in place, and now it's locked again. So the electric strike stays rigid, right, until it's powered, and when it's powered, it slides back. It essentially rocks on that. It looks like a straight piece of metal, but it's actually kind of curved, and it just kind of rocks back, and the door opens. Now, if you had a doorknob on here that had a push button on the back, and you went into this room during the day, and you simply turned that knob, came back a few hours later, you could just push down the doorknob, the bolt would retract, and you'd be able to open the door, and the strike would never be engaged, right? It would never buzz. The card reader wouldn't need to be used, and unless you had that door alarm, no one would know you went in. So you never want to use a doorknob that has a release on the inside. You want to use either a doorknob with no key, no unlocking capabilities at all, or you want to use one that has a key that's highly controlled, because when someone opens it with a key, they're pulling that bolt back right in here, right? Bolt sliding back from that lock, and this strike never does its job. When the strike does its job, it means somebody has used a card reader and come into the room. If you want to take a look at the dorms, I'm sure they have electric strikes. I mean, that would be the common place to have them. If for some reason you can't find one, let me know, and I will tell you. I will talk to the chief of police on campus and find out where they're using electric strikes and send you over to see one in action if you'd like. But in areas where it's really dusty and dirty, or areas where you might want to use water to clean a room, so if you have processing rooms for, say, chemicals, in tanneries, in pharmaceuticals, in a lot of places you'll have rooms where you need to wash the room down, essentially take a high pressure wash. That electric strike I showed you doesn't really take to water very well. It's an electronic piece, right? So you could use a magnetic lock, okay? You use it with an electronic access control system reader, just like you do with an electric strike. There's less impact to the door frame, okay? And what happens is it's a two-piece magnet. On the door itself, you have a big, heavy metal plate that you bolt to the door. We'll see a picture of this in a second. And then on the door frame, you mount a big electronic magnet that holds the door. Normally, they normally come in 600-pound or 1,200-pound pull, if you will. That's the amount of pressure it would take to pull this thing apart. 600 pounds of direct pressure or 1,200 pounds of direct pressure. They actually come larger than that, or you can install more than one. You can daisy chain them together, and now you've got double the amount of pulls on the door. But the one thing you have to remember about a maglock is it's totally energized all the time. So like you hear that buzz up at the electric strike, that means it's getting power. And the rest of the time, it's just dumb. It's sitting there where there's no power going to it. It's just in a locked state. Maglock gets power all the time. And when you run your badge, and it's a good badge read, and the door is going to unlock, it simply releases the magnet. It cuts the power to the magnet so that the door can open freely. And then when the door closes, the magnet engages again. Now, the thing you have to remember about that is if it is always engaged, then even from the inside, if you were to push on that door, you couldn't get it open. So with the maglock on the inside, I can turn the door handle and I can get out, right? There's a method of egress. On the outside, I can't turn the door handle at all. It's rigid because that electric strike is there. But with a maglock, you have to have a way to get out. So it must be tied to the fire system directly. The magnet power has to drop out when there's a fire in the building, when the fire alarm goes off, when somebody pulls a pull station or a smoke detector goes off. Whenever that fire alarm goes off, magnetic doors must by law release. Very important to remember that, because you don't want to be the security manager who has somebody wire this thing incorrectly, didn't directly connect it. It must be a direct connection to the fire system. You can't say if a fire alarm goes off, the guard then is going to push a button that releases all the maglocks. It has to be a direct connection from the fire system that releases the power. Okay? So let's take a look at what a maglock looks like and talk a little bit about them. So here are two side-by-side pictures of a maglock. This is one that's closed. So on the door frame here, right, it's a glass door, there's a big metal plate here on the top, and they actually installed a secondary one right over top of it. And this unit right here, this box, is the magnet. Power coming from wiring coming through here. Okay, when the door is open, you'll be able to see this is the magnet right here. And it actually has the ability to have an alarm built into it that tells you when the magnet has been released. So if someone did use 600 or 1200 pounds of pressure, it would tell you that the two sides of the magnet are no longer touching each other. Okay, maglocks are great. One more caveat though, besides the fire system, which I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to see that as a quiz question. So don't forget that a maglock has got to be tied directly into the fire system. The one other thing is, what happens when the power goes out? So with an electric strike, if the power goes out, it's not normally powered, so the door stays locked. With a maglock, it is always powered. You always have to have power to have the magnet. So when the power goes out, it releases. Most access control systems and the door hardware, electric strikes, and maglocks are tied into a battery backup system that will give you about 4 or 5 hours of power to make sure that you can tide yourself over until power comes back on, or you can get hooked to generator power of some kind. The issue is that an electric strike, if the power goes out at, say, 3 a.m., and no one uses that door at all because everyone's asleep, everybody starts maybe getting up around 7 in the morning, between 3 and 7, you're going to use none of that battery power. So you'll start using your 4 or 5 hours when things start to get really going during the day, and you'll get a much longer time frame out of it. With the magnet, it doesn't matter. In fact, when people are using the door, you're using less power because the power is dropping out. So that whole time, as soon as the power goes out, it starts draining that battery. So maglocks don't have the lifespan in a power outage. And so you will need to make a provision that any doors that you have maglocks, you can assume that even though your battery life may say 4 hours from the manufacturer, you're probably going to get about 2.5 tops out of a battery because they start to degrade almost immediately on use. And you've got to make a plan for when all those doors start opening up, because if you have a high security building and you've got maglocks all over the place, those doors are going to start releasing as soon as the battery wears out. So you have to have a backup plan for power, more so with maglocks than you do with electric strikes. So the term cipher lock is something that you may not have heard. You may think of it as a push button lock. I wanted to show the picture first because this is a mechanical. This is a simplex model. I forget what the model number is on this thing, 41 I think. But it's a simple mechanical lock in which you set it for a code, usually 3 or 4 numbers. And it has a key override, as you can see right here, just in case you forget the code or the lock goes bad. but it's generally one or two codes you put in here. You may have a master code that you give to, say, a fire department, so they can get in and out of a particular area if they need to. And then you have a one code that you give your employees, and they all get in using the same code. That is a mechanical cipher lock. Cipher being C-Y-P-H-E-R, cipher meaning figured out, coded, right? Reading, writing, ciphering is what, as they used to say. It's math, it's coding, it's numerical. Cipher locks have their use and they have their downside. So cipher locks can be mechanical or electronic, and the electronic ones are relatively, I wouldn't say they're relatively new. They've been around probably for 15, 20 years now, but the technology in them has certainly changed. The mechanical have push buttons, as you saw. It's set to one code. You can have an override code. You can have a master code that you give to others, but generally you set them with 1 to 2 codes. They won't take a lot of codes. You can't put, if you have 100 people go in the room, you can't give each one of those people their own code. And why would you anyway? Because it's not keeping track of who goes in when on a mechanical push button lock, on a mechanical cipher lock, okay? Electronic has a touch screen or keyboard type buttons, and each user has their own code, okay? The reason each person has their own code is that inside of that lock, it retains a history, usually of the last 5,000 entries. That's pretty standard now, but they're getting, memory's cheap and getting easier to put in these things. You actually have to go to the lock with a device to put in someone's new code, but then that code becomes theirs. So if your code is 4321 and mine is 1234, and you and I don't know each other's codes, when you go, you put in 4321, I can go back in the history and see that at 4:28 in the afternoon, 4321 was used on this particular date, and I know that if you have not shared your code, which you shouldn't be allowed to do, right? It's not an excuse. I know that you were the one that went in the room. If it was 1234, then I would know that it was me that went in the room when I checked that history. So the electronic ones have a history. That's the difference in the two, really. The electronic ones are a bit more expensive. Jumped around here a little bit. Let's go back to cipher locks. They're a bit more expensive, certainly. And they are harder. You really have to go back every time you put somebody in. So you don't want to have a large number of users for them. But cipher locks have their use. Mechanical cipher locks, I will tell you that on audits, when I have gone to a door with mechanical cipher lock, probably 20 to 25% of the time, I am able to look within a 5-foot radius of that lock, and I will find the code written somewhere. On the back of a pipe, on a little piece of paper, on top of an electrical box, on the lock itself, underneath, someone has taken a grease pencil and written the code, because nobody remembers the codes. So with a mechanical cipher lock, the security level goes way, way down, obviously, because you have every user uses the same code normally, and that code gets written down somewhere. It gets shared an awful lot. When someone has their own personal code, and I always encourage security managers to let people pick their own number, because they usually pick the number that's the same one they use for the ATM machine and other 4-digit pins, and they're not going to hand that out to anybody just nilly-willy. Right? So let them pick the code, and you have a better sense of security with the electronic, plus you have the history. So that's cipher locks in a nutshell. The use for a cipher lock really is someplace where you need a history, but not enough where you're going to put in a full-blown card reader with a history. Running a card reader and electric strike or maglock can be rather expensive. I estimate usually somewhere around $10,000 per door, $10,000 US per door. To actually fully kit a door for electronic access. So think about your dorms when you go in and you're running your badge on that card reader. When you're daisy chaining them, you're putting many in, like in a dormitory. If you put them on individual rooms, it would be a little less, but no less than $3,500 to $5,000 per room to put those systems in. And so a cipher lock, you can usually get an electronic cipher lock, which is the lock, the key override, and the electronic unit for somewhere around $800 per door to put on. So they are cheaper, better for a temporary use, and they normally fit the standard drill outs for a door where you'd put the knob in the lock. This lock goes in it, and then the plate with the cipher just goes up above it and mounts on a little plate you screw to the door. So they're easy to retrofit and put on yourself, quite frankly. But don't discount, especially electronic cipher locks, as a cheaper option than putting a card reader on someplace where you need a history, And the user base doesn't change that much, so you don't have to go back and do it a lot. And you may need to have a key override. So they're kind of that medium ground between a lock and an electronic lock. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about padlocks, because padlocks are something that we, if we have an outside application and we need to lock something down quick, we grab a piece of chain and a padlock and we lock it down. And people don't think so much about the padlock type they use, but the type that they use can really impact how secure that area really is. Especially if you're putting it on a solid door where someone, if you have it putting on a chain link fence, right, with a piece of chain, it's easier to cut the fence than it is to cut the lock. The fence is normally 12 gauge. The shackle on a standard padlock is probably a 1/2 inch. You'd need a saw to get that, where I could cut through with a good set of metal clippers through a chain link fence. But if you're putting it on a solid hasp on a solid door somewhere, you really want to think about the different designs of the padlock, because there are some that are much better than others, and they're just not the ones that you're used to seeing, quite frankly. So here's a couple of different padlocks, and again, I'm pulling this stuff off the web because I think it's the easiest place to find the pictures. This part of the lock is called the shackle, and of course the thickness of the shackle means higher security, the thicker it is, right? Also, you have to think about vertical clearance, and that is the distance between here and here. Now think about this lock sitting on someplace, on a hasp somewhere, right? I've locked a shed, right? Think about the way you throw that little hasp over, right? You put the padlock on, you clip it, and it's on there. Or think about it on a locker, if that's easier for you, right? If this shackle is really long, and they make these things where you have a 6-inch shackle that comes down, it's easier for me to tilt that up, to put a hacksaw on it, and to saw it, right? If it's really short, it's kind of awkward, but if it's long, it's easier. So you want the distance, the vertical clearance, to be as low as possible. You want the shackle to be as thick as possible. But there's one problem with this standard type of padlock, and that is that one side swivels, right? When you open up the padlock, you twist it, right? And it twists on the one side. The one side comes out of the lock, right? The other one you twist, and that's how you take the lock off the locker. If you cut it here, right, and this is the twisting side, you just cut it in one place and twist it, and it comes off. Now, if you look at this cylindrical padlock, or better yet, this monoblock, which is even more secure, simply because of the thickness of it, right? If you put this on and you cut it in one place, when you turn the key on this, it goes down around the cylinder. It spins. If you cut it in one place, you've done nothing. You must cut it in two places. And look how small this area is to cut. If you got your hasp here in the middle, where it's going through on your locker, you got a very small area to get a cutting tool. You probably couldn't fit a bolt cutter in there. And with this one, it's even smaller, and the lock is tougher. When you turn the key, this retracts down in here, right? There's no cutting edge, and if you do want to cut it, or cut it with bolt cutters or with a hacksaw, you must cut it here and here. One cut is not going to be enough. Whereas with this, because it's on a swivel, one is enough. So when you start to think about padlocks, okay, think about the fact that anything that's cylindrical or a monoblock requires 2 cuts to get that lock off. If you're going to cut it off, right? You're the bad guy. You're going to cut it off. This type of lock, 1 cut. One set of bolt cutters, snap, twist it, and it's off. So if you have the use for this lock someplace where there's a lot of foot traffic, where someone is going to be seen with bolt cutters or a hacksaw, right? You can use this standard type. If you have it on a back building, a warehouse building, say, in the back of your facility, and you need to just put a padlock on something, be it temporary or permanent, you want to use something that has the longest delay factor, right? We're talking about delays now, right? Any of these locks and any of these devices can be defeated. So I don't like deny. You saw the book said deny. You don't deny anyone ever. Everything can be broken into. It just takes longer time. You want to delay as long as possible. 2 cuts take twice as long as 1 cut. These locks have a longer delay and thus are more secure. So we've come to the end of our discussion on locks, and I bet you are about as bored to tears as you can be. I understand this stuff is rather dry, but it is hugely important if you are a security manager to pick the right lock for the right application. Get the wrong one and you have done more harm than good. Put the wrong lock on and lock someone in a room when there's a fire and they may die. Put the wrong type of classroom lock on and you may require a teacher to walk out into the area of an active shooter in order to protect their students. Put a passage set where you need to have a lock and you have no security at all. Put a storeroom lock on and you have better security than you will with an office lock. But there's a chance the person may lock themselves out, right? And they can't just unlock the door so that people can come and go through their office during the day, and it feels like that they're the snobbish executive with their door locked all the time. So you have to think about the different types of locks to use. I would encourage you, with the notes you've taken on these slides, you print out the slides and take the notes, just make yourself a real quick chart of I think we went through 6 different types of locks, right? Make quick notes about the 2 or 3 features. Has a back button, has a turn button on it, has no turn button, has a key on both sides. Each one of them had something a little different. And when you go and look at locks, take your little cheat sheet, have that little, you can put it on an index card, quite frankly, take a look and try to identify what type of lock it is. That will get it in your head the way you need to get it so that you can realistically talk about this as a security manager, especially with a construction company if they're building you a new building. So, this week, you had some reading, and you did that before the lecture. If you went down my order of operations, good. You just sat through the lecture. Congratulations. I appreciate your time. We have a discussion this week, and so the discussion really is a one-way discussion, so it's more of an essay. But I want you to find and take photos of 3 different lock types. That's why I think maybe on an index card, you're going to want to just write down the 6 or 7 different types of locks and what their features are. So these can be padlocks, these can be electric strikes, they can be mag locks, they can be any of the lock sets, which are a little harder to identify, but there's a lot more of them out there, right? I want you to take pictures of 3 different types and then tell us what type it is, where it was used, and if you think it was the proper one to use or if you think there was a better one to use for that application. Now on the classroom locks, you may have to ask an instructor to just turn the key for you. Go to any one of your classes if you're there early enough and the door is not yet open. When the instructor comes, if they turn the key and they unlock the door, check the handle and see if it's rigid. If it's still rigid from the outside and on the inside there's no keyhole, then it's a standard classroom lock. If it's rigid on the outside still and there's a key on the inside, then it's probably a security lock, right? Classroom security lock. But tell us what type, where it is, and if you think it was used properly, if it's the right application that we talked about. Or just find one lock set that you know is absolutely the wrong one, and in a few sentences tell us why you think it's improper, tell us where it is, and put a photo of it. So in your discussion, you will have 3 photos of lock sets taken anywhere. Don't care if it's in your house, don't care if it's in at the university, if it's your place of work, wherever. Take a picture. Tell us what type of lock it is, and if it makes sense to have that lock there. Why does it make sense that they installed that one? Or what could they have installed better? If you find one, though, that's absolutely wrong. If you find a passage set on somebody's front door, right? If you find a office lock on a room that should always stay locked. If you know you found the wrong one, you only have to do one, but you got to tell us why you think it's wrong. And if someone posts just one, when you list your post, please just put the word wrong in it somewhere. So when we go down and we see that wrong, I want everybody to take a look at that one and let us know if you agree. That's the only answer. There's no required answers to the posts this week. Well, normally my discussions, I require a certain number of answers back to others. In this case, let's just post if you find somebody finds something wrong. Let's everybody go in there and find out and see if we agree with their logic about why something else would have been a better choice. So with that, we are at the end of our lecture. I hope everybody has a great week. As always, let me know if you need anything. We're at 49 minutes, a little bit long, and it's going to be a little bit harder of a discussion this week, so you got some work to do. I promise next week we're going to talk about barriers, lights, and emergency call systems, perimeter security items, and there'll be a quiz, but there won't be as much legwork, and then we'll try to make it shorter. Have a great week, everybody.